Yes, so that's very good. That's 2 points. You can have an extra point for satire. It's the rather obvious problem encountered by the Royal Bank of Scotland when they introduced their new photo credit cards, namely which image a transvestite should use. The bank decided to issue them with 2 cards, one for their appearance during their 9-to-5 job with the Ministry of Defence, and one showing them dressed as a man. So, if you're approached by a beautiful leggy blonde with a credit card saying Miss Frank Boff, you'll know she's got an account with the Royal Bank of Scotland. And finally, Ian, what's £1,200 a week more?
This is your telephone bill is going to be £1,200 a week more in order to pay for the salary rise of Sir Ian Vallance. You may not have known, he hasn't had a salary rise for about 5 minutes. So he's decided that he should award himself another one.
It's the chairman of British Telecom, Ian Vallance, who has just awarded himself an extra £64,000. It was described in the press as a telephone number salary, which presumably means he keeps getting the wrong amount. But then in the end, who begrudges the chairman of British Telecom an extra 64 grand a year? I think we all do, don't we? And that being the end of round 2, you'll be keen to know that, well, Paul and Clare have a still frail 8, and Ian and Nick have a stonking 9. And so we meander onto the broad sunlit uplands of round 3, in which each team gets a disparate selection of misleading images, all of which add up to a major news story of the week. So, Ian and Nick, unravel this lock.
Oh, my bill's long.
How unpleasant. It's a swab.
And my wife.
Aerosol. That can't be a British Telecom bill, far too low.
That's Ted Malt. This is Ken Barlow proving his sex life isn't boring.
I'm glad to say the man sitting next to me has just gone bankrupt.
Yes, any idea?
Yeah, I think it's taking male hormones, as they were doing there from that man's armpit, I think, and they're spraying male hormone onto bills, so that when they arrive, you're meant to be threatened by them, apparently, and want to pay more happily.
It seems
so logical. Why didn't they think of it before?
That's right. The simplest ideas are always the best, aren't they? It's the extraordinary revelation that a British company is applying for a patent or patent to produce an androstenone spray, androstenone being the distilled scent of fear taken from the male armpits, so rather like Groot. The idea is to spray it on bills sent through the post and onto door-to-door salesmen in order to terrify the householder into paying up. Unfortunately, the spray only scares men. Women find it rather appealing. And pigs are driven into crazed frenzy of lust.
So was that a gas bill he was trying to get back, that pig there?
I didn't ask him. If a double glazing salesman drops by, a man will be too frightened to keep him out, a woman will invite him in for a cuppa, and the pig will roger him senseless. Paul and Clare, does this ring any bells?
The Avengers.
Paul Daniels, isn't it?
Yes, I know what this is.
Someone not using direct to inquiries. New salary of balance.
Yes, this is a bizarre... there's a convention of memory people who specialise in memorising obscure, strange things. There's a man who's memorised a Cleveland telephone book or something in America. And I think the woman on the bicycle, he said that to remember numbers, he'd make visual images. So like the number 50346 for some reason. He would imagine his mother on a bicycle holding a bottle of tomato ketchup. And that would help him memorise the number. What he wants to do if he wants to remember his mother riding a bike with a bottle of ketchup, I don't know.
That's right. One memory giant, Dominic O'Brien, learnt 25 randomly shuffled packs of playing cards. He must be an interesting person to talk to. Just remind me again of the last half of the 23rd pack, Brian. Well, time now to spring into our archive round. One what happened next per team. Ian and Nick, what rather wet occasion is this?
The Labour 8 is a determined crew, ballasted by Big Jim Callaghan, propelled by Cambridge Cox Carol Burton. Then the Prime Minister appears.
Walks across the water.
And sinks. I think I've got to presume that the Labour boat, because it was just an innocent vessel out for a nice little sail, was towed underneath by a nuclear submarine.
Now, this must be a Labour versus Conservative boat race.
It was.
And it was the old first-past-the-post system. Which means there wasn't a Liberal boat there at all.
No. Any ideas what happened other than...
They collide.
Well, let's...
Maggie falls in and drowns.
That's just wishful thinking. Let's see how right or wrong you are.
The Labour 8, including former Prime Minister Jim Callaghan, capsized and sank into the muddy waters of the Thames. There were some anxious moments before Mr Callaghan, along with MP Robert Kilroy-Silk, was hauled onto a rescue boat. But he was apparently unscathed, apart perhaps from some damage to his image as a senior statesman.
We have a certain way of treating our ex-Prime Minister.
Can you imagine Kilroy going around afterwards asking everyone how they feel? Is it bad for you? Are you very, very wet?
Yes, I'll give you a point anyway. It's the Westminster Regatta in 1986, when in a moment laden with heavy symbolism, the Labour Party boat sank without trace. If only Roy Hattersley hadn't had that fourth helping of suet dumplings. Paul and Clare, an international incident for you to recall, and a rather brief one.
The two leaders did discuss Cambodia in detail.
The bill came round and there was an argument. It's, who had the wine? No.
I think the geriatric old Chinese bloke fell in his soup and then they went out and beat up all the students in Finland.
Wasn't it that half an hour later they wanted another Chinese meal?
Oh, nonsense. That's just a very old joke that you've dressed up very thinly.
I haven't dressed it up at all.
I'm being kind.
You're not going to get any points for it,
I was going to give you the one about Pol Pot noodles in a minute.
I'd like to hear that one.
I'll give you a point for mentioning the two people, but let's see.
The two leaders did discuss Cambodia in detail. There was a banquet lunch with the architect of perestroika showing a dexterous touch with his chopsticks.
Yes, it was Mikhail Gorbachev back in the days when he dared to take a holiday. Visiting Deng Xiaoping, who at 85 was the gay young blade of the Chinese cabinet. Deng probably having difficulty there because he normally pops out for a Big Mac at lunchtime. So, at the end of that round, a quick update reveals that Paul and Clare have a still rather gaunt 11, and Ian and Nick have a well-nourished 12. And so to our seldom celebrated odd one out round, in which each of the panel is given 4 famous faces, 3 of which have some dark secret in common. Paul, a traditionally impossible mixture for you. Arthur Scargill, Doris Day, Norma Major, and Trade Secretary Peter Lilly. What do they have in common?
Doris Day seems to have Arthur Scargill's hair, doesn't it? Just to the right there. Well, Doris Day made a series of films with Rock Hudson, but then so did Arthur Scargill. Arthur and Rock go on holiday.
Must have missed that one.
Is it that Day, Lily and Major are all words that mean something, and Scargill doesn't mean anything? You're going to say no, aren't you?
I'm going to say no. You're clutching at straws. It's Peter Lilly, as he's the only one not to have had a flower named after him. He, of course, had himself named after a flower. All the others are varieties of roses. The Doris Day is a lovely yellow rose. The Norma Major is the world's first grey rose. And you can also tell the Arthur Scargill rose by its petals. When one comes out, they all come out. Clare, 4 glamorous lovelies for you. Princess Anne, Jackie Onassis, Julie Andrews, and Michael Foote.
The problem is finding the thing that you've chosen to be significant. I mean, like 3 are women and 1's a man, so that's a bit too obvious.
It is. You don't really get any marks for that, I'm afraid, no.
I think they've been heavily criticised for bad dress.
No, only Michael. They all the rest are being well dressed and not him.
I'll give it to Paul, yes. They all won the Worst Dressed Person of the Year award, apart from Michael Foote, incredibly. Princess Anne...
There must have been a lot of competition that year.
Wurzel Gummidge, I think. Michael Foote has never won it, as they didn't consider any of the things he wore constituted clothes. Nick, for...
Poor old Michael Foote never won much, did he?
Everybody
Sorry.
loves him.
Yeah, I bet
We
they
do, actually.
Yes,
Everyone loves a loser.
Well, it's very British, isn't it?
Sad but true. Nick, 4 British institutions for you. Michael Fish, Oliver Reed, Tony Adams, captain of Arsenal, and Patrick Nicholls, MP.
Well, it's got to be Tony Adams, hasn't it? Because all the other 3 understand the offside law.
All the other support teams that are still in the Rumbelows Cup.
If not, Michael Fish, because the other 3 have been done for drink driving. Maybe. Have they?
Well, this man has.
Not as such. You've got the right reason, but the wrong person.
Oh, right.
This MP was done while he was
So
actually
Ollie
in
Reid
charge of
hasn't
it.
been done then?
He was the
Absolutely
minister.
right. Yes,
Hasn't
well
been
done. 2 points. It's Ollie Reid, who's the only one of the 4 not to be prosecuted for drunken driving.
He's never been sober enough to buy a car.
Yes, Patrick Nicholls was the Conservative MP who was put in charge of a campaign to warn people about the dangers of drunken driving, which he succeeded in doing by personal example. Michael Fish clearly drinks like one. And Tony Adams was arrested and jailed after an incident involving a row of telegraph poles that made the opening credits of RoboCop look positively tame. And finally, Ian, some all too familiar faces for you. Derek Jameson again.
That's teeth.
Good morning.
Liberace, Sonia Sutcliffe, and Labour MP Michael Meacher.
Well, they've all got something in common with Ken Barlow. That they're not boring at all. Fantastically interesting, all of them.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, yeah. This is obviously a litigation question. And I think the link between these people is that Liberace was a successful litigant. He sued a newspaper for suggesting he was gay and won. Which tells you a lot about the libel laws. Derek Jameson sued the BBC for a sketch in which they said he thought erudite was a type of glue. Michael Meacher sued The Observer. He sued Alan Watkins for a suggestion that he pretended to be rather more working class than he was. And he also lost quite a lot of money.
Sonia Sutcliffe, Ian?
Now, her I don't remember.
Well, let me remind. Sonia Sutcliffe took Private Eye and News of the World to court for the same allegation that she accepted money from a journalist. Private Eye lost and News of the World won. So if you want to sue someone, we can recommend not suing the News of the World. On which sobering thought, we draw this round to a welcome close, at which point I can tell you that Paul and Clare have an overwhelmingly poor 13, and Ian and Nick have a frighteningly efficient 16. So as the suspense builds to an almost unnoticeable climax, we come to the final round. Each team gets a set of the week's headlines, but with a word or two missing. They have to identify the missing words or concoct a better alternative. So, Paul and Clare, you seem to be what can only be described as losing. So, you have to go first. Eyes down, look in. McGregor proposes what in Commons?
Sense?
Orgy?
Karaoke night. How about that?
curfew is the answer. Next, Gorbachev insists he is in what?
Pantomime this Christmas.
Sadly not.
Incontinent.
Control.
Which continent?
In control is the right answer. Well done. Next, what oust babies as in thing to cuddle?
John Selwyn Gummer.
It's a type of
Crabs
animal.
with 3 claws.
Well, I'll give you a point for that because it's actually lobsters is the answer. Next, Mr. Kinnock has his cabinet whatted for him.
Emptied by Roy Hattersley.
Detoxed.
Is incorrect.
Picked.
Chosen is correct. Very good. And finally, major cause for women's what?
Realm.
Which he reads every Sunday.
I'm sure he does, but it's not the right
Jobs,
answer.
charter.
Advance is the right
Advance.
answer. Sorry. So, Ian and Nick, your turn. How the Sunday Times helped Reagan find his what?
Arse.
Diaries.
Roots.
It is roots. Well done. Small what for Maggie?
Git as a son. You know about libel, Ian.
No, that's fair comment.
I'm slander, anyway.
It's founded in truth, so you're all right. Small what for Maggie? Any ideas? No.
Is it hope?
Hope is correct. Well done. Next, France in despair as Mitterrand loses his what?
Temper and nukes Twickenham.
Is it sexual organs in a card game?
It's not quite. It's grip, really, is the answer. So maybe it's
Same thing.
Next, you must keep your bank manager in what?
Jail.
I agree, but it's not the answer. Check is the answer. And finally, Bush to appear in what?
America.
Scores are level at the moment, so whoever gets this...
Antiques Roadshow.
Off-the-shoulder cocktail dress. That's worth an extra point, isn't it, Angus?
Well, it might be. Someone mentioned a television show, so I'll give it to Nick, I think it was, because it's TV advert is the right answer. And with that, we find that a remarkable transformation in the score has failed to materialise, and as a result, Paul and Clare are this week's classroom dunces with 18, and this week's school swats are Ian and Nick with 20. So, heartfelt congratulations to our winners and skin-deep commiserations to our losers. But the end is not yet nigh because we still have our caption competition to settle. Paul and Clare, what do you think of for this?
Shark hits roof.
Well, thank you. Ian and Nick, what about yours?
Something about we were told to stuff the Australians.
Yes, I think that's quite enough. Thank you very much. All that remains is to thank our contestants Ian Hislop and Nick Hancock, Paul Merton and Clare Short. And on a final note, TVAM deny that since losing their franchise, they are allowing the quality of their technical staff to slip. And finally, in a remarkable breakthrough for British surgical technique, doctors give Mick Jagger's tongue a life of its own. Good night.
If you missed the first of tonight's quiz double bill, we'll give you another chance to see it later tonight at 1:35. That's nice of us, isn't it? In a few minutes, real life crime in 72 hours.